You are listening to episode number 47 of the Everything Ham Radio podcast. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the Radio Amateur Civil Emergency Services, or RACES for short. We talk about the Cleveland Amateur Radio Club from Cleveland, Tennessee in our Amateur Radio Club Spotlight. We talk about some upcoming events and contests, as well as some Hamfests for the next 2 weeks, and wrap it all up with some news from around the hobby. So, stay tuned. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Everything Ham Radio podcast. My name is Curtis, my call sign is Kilo 5 Charlie Lima Mike, and I am the host of this podcast. This podcast is released every Thursday for your listening pleasure, and you can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/Everything Ham Radio. I also have a Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Everything Ham Radio. You can follow me on YouTube at youtube.com/Everything Ham Radio and on Twitter at K5CLM. So, today we're going to be talking about RACES, the Radio Amateur Civil Emergency Services. But before we go into that, I just want to say something that happened to me this week. And it was very touching. I really didn't expect it. I got a package in the mail from my good friends over at the Ham Radio 360 podcast. And I opened it up, and I was sitting on the back porch with my wife, and when I opened it, there was another package inside. It was wrapped with Christmas wrapping. And there was a note on it, and it said, "From your friends at the Ham Radio 360 podcast, Cale, Jeremy, and George, do not wait until Christmas to open this." So I kind of looked at my wife, and she shrugged, and I opened up the package. Well, after I got through the industrial strength tape that was on the wrapping paper, I opened it up, and lo and behold, in there was a brand new Audio-Technica Atr 2100 microphone. Now, as a lot of you know, my audio of my podcast has not really been up to par. And I had a decent mic, or a decent headset mic. I listened to some other podcasts and stuff like that, and they're like, okay, you can use, this is like the very basic microphone that you could use for a podcast. Well, when I started it, that was pretty much all the money that I had. I really couldn't afford a whole lot more than what that cost, and it was like $30. I couldn't afford the price of the next step up, which is this mic, the Audio-Technica Atr 2100, because it runs about $80. And between the hosting fees and website fees and all that good stuff, $80 just really wasn't in my budget. But thankfully, I got some really great friends over at Ham Radio 360. Kel has been an awesome mentor for me. He has helped me. He's answered my questions that I've had. I've talked to him mainly via Messenger. I think I've talked to him one time on IRLP on the Echo Link, rather. I think is what it is. One time. Other than that, it's all via basically text messaging or instant messaging. But I would like to think that we've become really good friends. Well, the other part of these, George and Jeremy, for those of you that don't listen to the Ham Radio 360 podcast, they're the co-hosts of it. They came on board several episodes in, and they are really awesome guys. Now, George he owns the Sierra radio systems, and that company that he has there makes repeater controllers. And he also has another business called Pactena. Now, if y'all remember way back in like episode, I want to say right around 15 or so, we gave away a Pactina, and George was nice enough to donate it to us and actually gave me 2 of them. One for me to use and one for me to give away to a lucky listener. So I did and had a great turnout. I have yet to be able to use the antenna myself, but the antenna, just by looking at it, is really awesome. I mean, it's about the size of a, I don't know, like a iPhone 6 Plus maybe. I have pictures of it on my website on that post, and it's really neat. They have 2 different versions of it. They have one that's a 9-to-1 and one's a 40-to-1, and the 9-to-1 is basically about a 20 meter and above, 10, 12, 15, 18, and 20, I think. And the 40-to-1 is pretty much all band. You can use it on 40 meters. I think you can use it on 80 meters. So it's pretty much all band. But the 9-to-1, I think, is their most popular one that they sell. And this Pactina is great for stuff like SOTA activations or National Parks on the Air. Anyways, I got interrupted there by my little dog. So if you hear the little jingling in the background, that's my nice Dotson. He's coming to visit me. Anyways, the antenna is great for mobile uses, for like emergency kits, stuff like that. Really awesome radio. So definitely please go check that out. You can find it at pactenna.com. It's PACKTENNA.com, and I will put a link in the show notes as well. On top of having these, both George and Jeremy are the co-host of the Ham Radio 360 Workbench podcast. Now, the main podcast of Ham Radio 360 is every other weekend, or every other Tuesday, and on the opposite weeks is when the Workbench is. They have some really awesome topics over there. I think they just finished up doing like a antenna analyzer that you can buy off the Ham Radio 360 website, the circuit board for it, and build your own. And they have instructions and all that good stuff. The circuit board itself, I believe, is like $12.95, I believe, and they sold out of their first batch in like 19 hours, and they have more on order, but it's supposed to be here like in 3 weeks or something like that, right around Christmas time, I think is what Kel said. But anyways, check them out. Definitely check them out. Hamradio360.com. And Cale, George, Jeremy, thank you very much for this. Everybody that's listening, please let me know what you think of the difference between my last episode and this episode. Let me know what you think about it, about the sound quality, stuff like that. Something else that I wanted to talk about. I've gotten a couple emails over the past couple of months or so, and I recently got one here, actually a few minutes ago while I was recording this, of somebody saying that, of course, my audio sucked, basically, but hopefully this fixes it, and this episode will be a whole lot better than what it has been in the past. But one of the other things that they talked about was that some of the segments that I do, the Hamfest ones, the contest ones, stuff like that, they're really dry, and they complain that the news segment that I do can just be gotten from the ARRL website or the ARRL podcast. So what I'm thinking I'm going to do is I'm going to make a survey, and I'm going to put it online. So check my website when this goes out and take that survey for me. Subscribe to my email list, and I'll send out an email on that as well. But I think what I really want to do is I want to see what y'all want, what the general consensus is. Do y'all like the news segment? Do you not like it? Do you not want to hear about the Hamfest and stuff like that? I mean, this podcast is for y'all, more than just for me. Yes, I love doing it. Yes, it does take a lot of work, but I enjoy doing it. I enjoy doing something with the hobby, since I can't do a whole lot more. And this is one way of doing it. And I love my blog, I love my podcast, and but this is for y'all. I want to do what y'all will like. So please take my survey. I will tweet it out once I get it, and I might even make a small recording or something like that, a little mini podcast episode or bonus episode or something like that, letting y'all know about it. But anyways, I guess that's pretty much it that I have on my things to talk about before our topic of the day. So what do you say we go ahead and get started on talking about Servies? So first off, what exactly is Servies? Well, Servies stands for Radio Amateur Civil Emergency Services, and it was founded in 1952. And it was founded as a public service that was provided by a reserve or volunteer communications group within the government agency in times of extraordinary need. During periods of Servies activation, certified unpaid personnel are called upon to perform many tasks for government agencies they serve, although the exact nature of each activation will be different. The common thread, however, is communications. I mean, that is what we thrive with. That's what we do our best at, is communications. So who better than an amateur radio operator to handle communications? Now, Servies and other emergency communications functions provide a pool of emergency communications personnel that can be called upon in time of need. Servies, or they're also called auxiliary communications services, I think. Units across the country prepare themselves for the inevitable day when they will be called upon. When a local, county, or state government agency activates a Servies unit, that unit will use its communications resources to meet whatever need the agency has. Traditionally, Servies operations involve emergency message handling on amateur radio frequencies. These operations typically involve messages between critical locations such as hospitals, emergency services, emergency shelters, and any other locations where communications is needed. Now, this could be a Red Cross building or a Salvation Army building. You might have multiple emergency shelters set up around your area of operation, and typically a radio operator will go to each of those locations, and they'll be the one that provide communications. Now, there's also things like maybe a operator will go to a fire station if the fire service frequencies are down, and that is how they'll get notified of a call. So amateur radio is so vast in what we can do, and it's so much more reliable than any other type of communications, and that's really what amateur radio is all about, as far as the emergency aspect of it goes, I guess you could say. These communications are handled in any mode available, with 2 meter FM being the most prevalent. I cannot talk. Being the most used, basically what I'm trying to say. And actually, during times of war, when the president exercises his war emergency powers, Servies might become the only communications allowed via amateur radio. So if for whatever reason this act is enacted, if you're not a Servies member, you can't talk on amateur radio during that time. And this act was actually made when actually went into effect back in, I believe it was like 1973, and it was actually made because Congress believed that the president overreached his power of war in Vietnam, and so they made this where basically, if this was ever enacted, all troops had to be withdrawn within 60 to 90 days unless Congress approved otherwise. And all communications, all amateur communications would cease except for Racies affiliated communications. So if you're not a Racies member, you don't talk on amateur radio. And this is kind of like for a, I guess maybe a security reason type thing. Activating under the FCC's restriction, Racies rules is not always necessary when using amateur radio service frequencies for emergency communications. For example, communicators may need to communicate with ARIES or other radio amateurs who are not government certified to operate in a Racies net. Personnel also might become involved in non-amateur public safety or other government communications, emergency operations center staffing, and emergency equipment repair. So, while it's not always a Racies thing, you might get involved with other things. And typically, the way that a Racies net works, is different from other nets, is that if it is a true Racies net, if you're not a Racies member, you can't talk on the frequency. You can't, if you're doing a Racies event on a repeater, you can't use that repeater to communicate unless you're a Racies member. And then it has to be something pertaining to the event that you're working. So who exactly does Racies operate under? Well, Racies operates under the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA. Provides planning guidelines and technical assistance for establishing a Racies organization at the state and local government level. Now, the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, is responsible for the regulation of Racies operation. Racies is administered by local, county, or state civil defense agency responsible for disaster service. Now, this can mean you might work under the emergency management for your county or your city. Typically, I think it's going to be more predominantly on the county level that you're going to be working with, unless you're in a major metropolitan area, or a place like Los Angeles or Dallas-Fort Worth or Houston or Chicago or Miami or something like that. You're more likely to have a city level Racies group rather than a county one. But typically, I would think that the county-wide area is probably going to be more used than a city one will. But you also have to take into account the state level, because not only are you working for your local county, but you're also working for your state. And whenever something major does happen and Racies gets activated, one of the things that you have to establish is communications with the state. I'm actually the Racies operator for the county that I work for, and one of my responsibilities is to establish and maintain radio contact with our state emergency operations center. So that's one of my responsibilities of it, and that's the responsibility of any Racies operator for any emergency management situation. So the civil defense agency is typically an emergency service or emergency management, sometimes within another agency such as police or fire. Racies is a function of the agency's Auxiliary Communications Services, or ACS, sometimes also known as DCS, which is Disaster Communication Service. Could be Emergency Communication Service, ECS, could be Amateur Radio Public Service Corps, ARPSC, etc. But typically, Racies, that works. Many ACS or Racies units identify themselves solely as Racies organization, even though their communications function and activities typically go beyond the restrictions of Racies operations. Other ACS or Auxiliary Communication Services units combine government Racies and non-government ARIES, amateur radio emergency service activities, and identify themselves as ARIES/Racies organizations. And that's actually the way that we worked here in my county for quite a while. You were not only on a Racies team, but you were on an ARIES team as well. So during an actual event, you would work under the Racies, And then after the event, you would basically just flip your hat around and work under Aries. So a lot of times that works, and honestly, most of the team members are probably going to be the same anyways, so you might as well do that. It just, I don't know, you think if somebody's going to volunteer to help during a Races event, why wouldn't they do it during an Aries event too? I mean, it doesn't seem feasible to me, I guess, maybe. Anyways, other ACS units who use amateur radio for emergency government communications identify themselves solely as Aries organizations, whether or not they activate under FCC Races rules. And that's actually pretty much the way that we work now. We pretty much work under Aries rather than Races, even though we still use Races type protocol type systems. The Amateur Radio Regulation Part 97, Subpart E, 97.407, was created by the FCC to describe Races operation in detail. Although no longer issued or renewable, Races station licenses were issued in the past by the FCC to government agency for Races operations. The agencies may continue to conduct Races operations without these licensings, using primary or club call sign. So basically, what I'm saying is that the FCC would grant licenses for Races clubs or Races units that you could use during a Races event, and that was the only time you could use them. But now you typically just use your net control call sign or your club call sign or something like that. So what about training? Well, while each Races organization may not require the same thing, there are a few classes, I'm doing air quotes here, classes that are required by Nihms, which is the National Incident Management System, for all entry-level first responders. And as amateur radio operators, we fall under that category of entry-level first responders. These are the Nihms Courses IS-100B and the IS-700B. While these are the only two that actually are required by the Nihms system, several Races groups also require the IS-200 or the IS-800. And, they're not hard classes. They have some awesome information in it, so I don't know why you wouldn't take them anyways. The 1, 2, 7, and 8 are a wealth of information. And if you've been doing this for any time at all, you've probably gone to Incident Management School, Incident Command School, I guess, ICS, in the past, and this is basically what replaced it, was the Nihms system. So, but there's, not only just these four, but there's a whole bunch of online courses that you can take that deal with what we do, and some stuff that don't deal with what we do. I mean, there's one for animals in disaster, and there's one for oh God, I can't even think of it right now. But I mean, there's some really off the wall ones that you can take. There's Public Information Officer has its own thing. But anyways, like I've said before, with amateur radio, it's a never-ending learning experience. And when you stop learning about the hobby, you kind of stagnate and you don't really do anything. I mean, that was one of the reasons that I started this blog, was that I wanted to learn more about the hobby, stuff that I have never done before, and learn it in a way that I can tell y'all about it. Now, some of this stuff may not be all that great. I may not explain it all that well, but it gets you an idea. It gets you an idea what the topic is, what the topic is about, and gives you that kind of thing to move forward and learn about it yourself, or maybe that little inkling, that little spark of interest where you can go and run with it, right? So, another thing that in the last episode we talked about was Skywarn. Now, Skywarn, even though it is a totally separate entity, as far as emergency communications goes, and it's actually formed by the National Weather Service. A lot of times, Skywarn and Races go hand in hand. A Races team will be your Skywarn team, and a lot of times it'll be your Aries team, and they all kind of mesh together. But because of the way that both of them work, Skywarn a lot of times is run under Races flag, so to speak. Since they are pushed so often together, Races groups require Skywarn training as well. So what other type of training should you do? Well, one of the things that we as communicators are often called upon to do is radio traffic. And by that I mean like message handling. So the way that you need to train for this is the way that you're actually going to do it. And when you're in an emergency situation, you're going to use a formatted message so that both the sending station and the receiving station knows what's coming next, how long the message is going to be, who the sending station is, where it's going to, all that good stuff. And that is why a radiogram was basically made. So a radiogram training is definitely something you should look into. Things like search and rescue. I mean, a lot of times when you have a search and rescue team, they'll have a radio volunteer go with them so that they can communicate back with the home base, so to speak. And a lot of times this training is done in person. However, there is some on-the-air training as well. Races, however, has a limitation as far as what you can do with on-the-air training. According to the Races regulations, you are limited to 1 hour of on-the-air training a week. Now, this can be extended with a special permission, but even then, you're limited to a maximum length of 72 hours, and it can only be done twice a year. Typically, when this happens, when you have a extended training period, this is often done with other agencies. You might have a emergency drill that has law enforcement and EMS and fire departments and gas companies and hospitals and several different entities that are working all together. And you have this like mock drill. You have say a tornado comes through your town. This is what each area is going to do. Well, amateur radio is a important role in that, in the aspect that if a tornado came through, regular fire, police, EMS, all that communications it very well might be down. And, cell phones are probably more than likely going to be down. So we as communicators need to step up and say, we're here, use us. So let's talk a little bit about standardization, okay? Especially since September the 11th, 2001, when shortly after that, when the Department of Homeland Security came into being, one of the things that they pushed for and is taught in the Nihms system is standardization, or interoperability, is the way that they put it. And that means basically that one entity can talk to another entity, or one entity uses the same forms as another entity, or uses the same radios as another entity, or something like that. Or at the very least they can talk to each other. So one of the things that goes hand in hand with this is power connections. Now, you may kind of wonder about this, but let me explain, okay? 20 plus years ago, when I got my license, you would have each radio manufacturer had its own type of power connection. One might have a plug that has one going one way and one pin going the other. You might have one that are round pins, one might be square pins. So if you didn't have the right type of connections to power your radio, you couldn't power your radio unless you brought the type of connections that was needed. So whenever I first started, one of the things that we did was made some way that it could be more generalized. Now, we didn't have all the fancy connections that we do now, that we're going to talk about here in just a minute. So what basically we did, what my dad made was, he got 2 pieces of copper pipe and flattened them out, mounted them on a block of wood, and drilled holes through them, through the pieces of copper in through the board, and put bolts through it with wing nuts and washers. And while this made it easier, because you can have your power cord and you can have a ring connector on the end of it, you slide it over this bolt, tighten down the wing nut, and you're golden. You have your power, right? But nowadays, we kind of take it one step further. Nowadays, and honestly, I haven't seen a new radio in a long time, so I don't know if it's gotten more standardized or not. But one thing I do know is that there's one system out there that has been widely adopted by RACES organizations. And that is a connection called an Anderson power pole connector. And these things are really, really nice, really easy to use, easy to put on, and a lot of things use it. One of the things in particular that I'm thinking about is called a rig runner. And you might remember a couple episodes ago, if you looked at the show notes, in the mobile installation episode that we did, you might remember a picture of a rig runner. Basically, a rig runner is a power distribution block, and it had, it might have 4 connections, it might have 10 connections, but basically you run a high gauge wire from your battery to this rig runner, and then it's broken down into however many distribution points, and each one of them are fused. And you might have some of them that have a 20 amp fuse, some of them might have a 30 amp fuse, some might be a 10, whatever. But you had the same type of connections across this power distribution system. And this system is really nice, and it's very versatile and very easy to use. I've been using one pretty much right after they came out, like 15 years ago or so, I think. I used a rig runner for my system, and I haven't had a lick of problems with it, and it's been awesome. And it's made by a company called West Mountain Radio, which they make other stuff other than just this rig runner as well. They make a thing called a rig blaster, and this rig blaster can be used for so much stuff. It can be used for like RIDI, and it can be used as a emergency repeater controller. It can be used to do announcements on a repeater or on a simplex frequency. It can be used for echo link. There's so much uses for this thing. And again, I've had one pretty much since the very first model that they had that came out, and I haven't had a problem with it either. So check those out. There is a link in the show notes of today's episode to West Mountain Radio and to the rig runner. But definitely check that out if you don't have one already. The next thing I want to talk about is another question that I've gotten asked quite a bit, and not only in the amateur radio world, but in general, and that's a liability. Now, one of the things that the reasoning behind not helping is, I don't want to get sued. I don't want to do this and get sued. Well, as hams, this really hasn't come up a whole lot, because I'm sure a big portion of amateur radio operators got involved with amateur radio in some form or another because they wanted to help. I know I did. I mean, that was the whole reason that I got my license. And if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you know that. I got my license 20 plus years ago in like 1995, I want to say, because of a $2,000 cell phone bill in 1 month during the Houston flood of 1994. And that cell phone bill was from my emergency response unit that we serve, or that my club serves. So we went and got our license, my dad and I, and we started a club that was used specifically for our emergency response unit in our church, and we use that for communications. So that's why I got involved in it, and I'm sure there's a bunch of people out there that got involved with amateur radio for that, basically the same reason. So I don't really hear a lot of people saying, well, I don't want to help, I don't want to volunteer because I might get sued. However, there are those out there that do that. There are those out there that are concerned about that, and rightfully so. I mean, there's always a chance that you might get sued. However, there is a silver lining in this, and that's called the Volunteer Protection Act of 1997. This act basically shields you from prosecution. It's not a get-out-of-jail-free card. It's not total protection from a lawsuit. However, it is basically just like the Good Samaritan law that we have here in Texas, and I'm sure elsewhere in other states. But basically it says that if you are operating within the scope of your responsibilities as the volunteer, that no harm was caused by willful or criminal misconduct, gross negligence, reckless misconduct, or a conscious flagrant indifference to the rights or safety of the individual harmed by a volunteer. If appropriate and required, the volunteer was properly licensed, certified, or authorized by the appropriate authorities for the action or practice in the state in which the harm occurred, where the activities were and practice was undertaken within the scope of the volunteer's responsibility in the nonprofit organization or government entity, and last but not least, the harm was not caused by a volunteer operating a motor vehicle, vessel, aircraft, or other vehicle from which the state requires the operator to or owner of the vehicle, craft, or vessel to possess a operator's license or maintain insurance. So basically what this is saying is that if you are doing what you're supposed to do and not trying to go above and beyond, if you do not intentionally do something that you're not supposed to do or do it wrong, and you don't have a license to do it, you're pretty well covered from criminal prosecution. Civil, on the other hand, it doesn't protect all that much for. However, you take that risk anytime you volunteer. Anytime you do anything in this life anymore, it seems you're going to have this issue. Somebody might see you, and it's sad to say. But anyways, that pretty much wraps up Racies. I've got a couple links to different Racies organizations. One of them have the Arlington County, Virginia Racies Resource Library, has a bunch of information in it. There's a Racies organization page that lists not every, but a big portion of Racies units around the U.S. And I actually got another one, and I don't have it actually on here now, but I will now that I'm thinking about it. That is the Dallas County Racies manual. It has a lot of information in it. So, but anyways, that pretty much wraps it up. If you have any questions or comments that you want to talk about with dealing with Racies, please leave them in the show notes of today's episode. And you can find that at everythinghamradio.com/podcast/47. That's number 47. So, that about wraps it up. Let's go on to our Amateur Radio Club Spotlight for this episode. Alright, so in our Amateur Radio Club Spotlight for this episode, we're talking about the Cleveland Amateur Radio Club in Cleveland, Tennessee. You can find their website at www.carc.cc. They're on Twitter at CARC_TN. You can find them on Instagram, instagram.com at CARC Radio Club. Their club call sign is W4GZX. That's Whiskey 4 Golf Zulu X-Ray. The Cleveland Amateur Radio Club is one of the few amateur radio club in the area that owns its own building, which is a huge blessing according to their vice president. This allows for club members to congregate any time that they want. Every Saturday, their clubhouse is open from 8 a.m. till noon for members to come and work on radio projects, get on the air, or just sit around and chew the fat with other hams. The clubhouse is located centrally in Cleveland, Tennessee on a high ridge and serves Cleveland and Bradley County as a emergency communication staging area. They've actually done tests, and it shows that they can actually cover their entire county and part of surrounding counties on VHF simplex. So that's pretty neat. I don't know how big their county is. If it was like my county, that would be really awesome, because my county is something like 20 some odd thousand square miles or something like that. I think it's north to south, it's 16 miles. And east to west, it is, I want to say about 40. So that would be really neat if you could cover everything on simplex. I very well doubt it. But, so I'm sure their county is probably a lot smaller than my county is. Their history, they actually recently, about 4 years ago, celebrated their 50th anniversary. And one of their members, a Larry Ledford, KA4J, made a nice PDF file entitled The Beginning of the Cleveland Amateur Radio Club. It's got a lot of information, and I haven't read it all. It's something, I want to say, like 13 pages long. But what I did read of it is very interesting. So there is a link to that PDF file in the show notes of today's episode. Their meetings, they have a general club meeting on the second, or they have a club meeting on the second and fourth Tuesday of each month except for December, and that's at 7 p.m. The second Tuesday is for general business. It's the business meeting. The fourth Tuesday is for training, more informational, non-business related meeting. They have a tutorial session on most Saturdays from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m., and they also have CW classes on Tuesday evenings from 6:30 to 7:30. They have two repeaters. Both of them are System Fusion repeaters. One of them is on 146.925, has a PL tone of 114.8. You can actually listen to it live online as well. They have a 440 repeater on 444.275, and it's also a System Fusion repeater. They have several nets that they do. They have the Southeast Tennessee Amateur Radio Net, or STAR Net, which on the first, second, and fourth Tuesdays at 8:30 p.m. on the 147.18 repeater there in Cleveland. The Bradley County Emergency Services Net is held every Monday night at 8 p.m. on the 146.925 repeater. And they also have a Cleveland Amateur Radio Club Slow Speed CW Net. It's on the first, second, and fourth Thursday nights of every month at 7 p.m. And it is on a frequency of 7.070 megahertz plus or minus. It seems to be a very active club. They are very active in contesting and are an official ARRL contest club. They participate in Field Day, ARRL Sweepstakes, CQ Worldwide, Tennessee QSO Party, ARRL VHF Contest, and several others. They also do quite a few community service type activities as well. So that is the Cleveland Amateur Radio Club in Cleveland, Tennessee. Again, you can find them at www.carc.cc. So definitely check them out if you're going to be in the area during one of their meeting nights or one of their net nights. Definitely check them out, or even try and get on their CW net on first, second, and fourth Thursdays on 7.070 megahertz. So maybe you can catch it, maybe you can't. But anyways, give them a shot. Give them a shout, rather. And if you do, make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Everything Ham Radio podcast. All right, so let's move on to our next segment, our upcoming events. All right, so in the events for this episode, again, all these times that I'm going to say are in Zulu time or UTC time, and all the information was taken from the WA7BNN contest calendar. So, on to this. December the 9th from 1:45 to 2:15 is the NCCC RTTY Sprint. From 2 to 3:30 is the QRP Fox Hunt, and from 2:30 to 3 o'clock is the NCC Sprint. On December the 10th, from 0000 hours to the 11th at 2400 hours is the ARRL 10-meter contest. On the 10th, from 1200 hours to 2400 hours on the 11th is the SKCC Weekend Sprintathon. December the 10th, from 1600 hours to the 11th at 1559 is the International Naval Contest. On December the 10th, from 2300 hours to 2300 hours on the 11th is the AWA Bruce Kelly 1929 QSO Party. On the 11th, from 21 hours to 22:59 is the CQC Great Colorado Snowshoe Run. On the 14th, from 1:30 to 3:30 is the NAQ CC CW Sprint. Also on the 14th, from 2 to 3:30 is the QRP Fox Hunt. On the 14th, from 2:30 to 3 is the Phone Fray. December 14th, from 13 to 1400 hours, and from 19 to 2000 hours, and on the 15th, from 3 to 400 hours, is the CW Ops Mini CWT test. December the 16th, from 1:45 to 2:15, we have the NCCC RTTY Sprint, followed from 2:30 to 3 by the regular NCC Sprint. The 16th, from 2 to 3:30 is the QRP Fox Hunt. December 16th, from 2000 hours to the 17th at 2400 hours is the Russian 160 meter contest. December 16th, from 21 to 2400 hours is the AGB Party contest. The 17th, from 0000 to 2400 hours is the Oklahoma DX RTTY contest. From 0000 hours to 23:59 on the 17th is the RAC Winter Contest. Also, at the same time is the Feld Hell Sprint. December 17th, from 1400 hours to 1400 hours on the 18th is the Croatian CW Contest. The 17th, from 1500 to 1500 hours on the 18th is the Stu Perry Top Band Challenge. The 18th, from 1800 hours to 23:59 is the ARRL Rookie Roundup on CW. And we also have from 2300 hours on the 17th to 2300 hours on the 18th is the AWA Bruce Kelly 1929 QSO Party again. And let's see, next up we have on the 19th, from 2 to 400 hours, we have the Run for the Bacon QRP contest. On the 21st, from 2 to 300 to 3:30, we have the QRP Fox Hunt. On the 21st, from 2:30 to 3 is the Phone Fray. And last but not least, the CW Ops Mini CWT test from 1300 to 1400, 19 to 2000 hours on the 21st, and on the 22nd from 300 to 400. That wraps up the events for the next 2 weeks. Again, all the information is in Zulu time, and it was taken from the WA7BNM contest calendar. Next up, we have our Hamfests. So there isn't a whole lot of Hamfests coming up real soon. Obviously, we're getting close to Christmas, but there is 4 of them over the next 4 weeks, and then that's pretty much it for December. It doesn't start up again until January. So after this week, there probably won't be this segment until the first episode of the year. So on the 9th, the Friday, the next day after this comes out, is the West Central Florida Section Convention, the Tampa Bay Hamfest in Plant City, Florida. On the 10th, we have Pearl River County ARC Hamfest in Poplarville, MS. It like totally skips my mind what MS is now. Mississippi, maybe? Anyways, Santa Fest in Cheltenham, Maryland. The next weekend on the 17th is the MARA Annual Christmas Hamfest in Minden, Louisiana. And that's pretty much it. Those are the 4 Hamfest for the next 2 weeks. All this information was taken from the ARRL Hamfest calendar. So that is pretty much it. Next, we have just the news. So stay tuned for that. Okay, so before I get started in the news segment, I wanted to tell you about something that I saw. I was going through last week's episode, the post on QRZ, and I got a response, a comment from another member of QRZ, of course, another ham. His call sign is N4, well, not necessarily his call sign, but his username on QRZ is NA4IT. I probably guess his call sign as well. Anyways, he writes, in McMinn County, Tennessee, we know at Skywarn firsthand. 3 nights ago, Athens, Tennessee was hit with an EF2 tornado. Amateurs were on the air relaying reports from 12:30 a.m. onward. Races was activated around 3 a.m. because one of the major towers for public service radio went down. During the tornado, the McMinn County Amateur Radio Club lost their repeater at the Athens site, but the 442.275 stayed up. Recovery is still ongoing. We've lost no lives, had 23 injured, and 1 baby born. That's awesome. He also posted a couple pictures as well in the post, and one of them is just, it's flabbergasting, really. It's a picture of the Athens Utility Board tower site where the at least a couple of the repeaters are. And this tower is probably, I would say, probably about, maybe 200, 250 feet tall, maybe. And about 3/4, maybe 2/3 of the way up the tower, it's literally bent in half. I mean, it goes up straight. It does a perfect 180-degree turn and points right back down. The antenna that's on the top of the tower that normally would point straight up is literally pointing straight down along the tower, going back down to the ground. You'll really need to check it out. Again, it's on the forums under Ham Radio News, and just find my post. I'll actually include a link in the show notes as well. He also included a picture of a cell tower that was about 200 feet away that just basically is in pieces. I mean, these pictures are just wow. So, I mean, definitely Mother Nature has a way of saying, hey, I'm the one that's still in control here. But, yeah, so check out the link in the show notes to see what these towers are, and I'll actually see if I can get permission from him to include it in the show notes of today's episode as well. But anyways, so the news for this episode is coming up next. Okay, so today in our news segment, we're going to be talking about some youth-related news topics. And as I had said on a previous episode, the youth of our hobby, I think, is a big importance when it comes to our future in amateur radio. Now, some might argue with that is that, people tend to come in maybe a little bit later in life, late 20s, early 30s, something like that. But starting people younger could potentially also increase our population. And there are several ways that people are doing it, and the ARRL has several programs that are in place, and we're going to talk about 2 of them right now, 2 of them today in today's episode. First one, we're going to be talking about the collegiate level, the college level, and I talked with, in a previous episode, we talked about youth and amateur radio, and we interviewed the president of I want to say it was Harvard, if memory serves me correct. I don't have it here in front of me. And we talked about the collegiate level of amateur radio. Well, the ARRL put this out on the 30th, and I know it's kind of old news, so please bear with me, but I found it really interesting. And being that I'm geared more towards youth participation in amateur radio and in other things, I'm a youth counselor and stuff like that in my church, it kind of touched me. So the title of the article is "The ARRL Expands Initiative to Fire Up Collegiate Amateur Radio Clubs." And what this thing talks about is basically college clubs and the problems that they have, being how, if you get a good leader in your club, they might not be a leader until, say, like their junior year. And if once they graduate college after 4 years of being there, then, they're gone. And you basically start all over. So this article, it says in part here, a growing number of campus radio clubs and student radio amateurs have begun to share ideas and suggestions on the ARRL Collegiate Amateur Radio Initiative Facebook, which is aimed at sparking renewed participation, activity, and idea sharing among this special sector of the amateur radio community. The now expanded initiatives stems from two well-attended ARRL New England Division convention forums for radio amateurs attending college. One hosted by the amateur radio clubs at Harvard and Yale. As the forum explained, the activity at the campus amateur radio club stations can vary widely from one year to the next as students graduate and newcomers arrive. And that's kind of what I was talking about. If you get a good leader in there, they graduate and move on. If you're lucky enough to have somebody that comes in as a freshman, it takes a while for them to get used to what's going on. And, you only have a few years there to do anything. So one of the things that this article talks about is getting more staff involved, maybe some alum involved, and stuff like that. Working on how to keep a college club going. And, it was a really interesting article, and I'm posting the full thing in my show notes. I'm not going to read it verbatim like I have in previous episodes. And I'll explain a little bit why a little bit later. But one of the things that was talked about in here, which in a way is kind of sad, and I'm going to read this paragraph of it. In a recent post, Kenny Height, KE8CTL, a graduate teaching assistant at West Virginia University, said the university's amateur radio club, W8CUL, has been unable to participate in recent on-the-air events due to lack of working equipment and questionable antenna setups, as he put it. We are working to identify working equipment and coax lines. Another poster, David Silage, K3DS, who's associated with the Temple University Amateur Radio Club, K3TU, said, a key to a successful and long-running college club seems to be faculty involvement for stability and recognition. He invited other CARI participants to check out the club's website and see what their members are doing. So, that's one of the things I was talking about, the, faculty needing to help, and that will kind of help transition new leadership, keep a general direction of things, and, not only faculty, but us as hams out in the quote-unquote real world, being involved at the college level is something that we can do to keep a club on track, so to speak. And so, if you have a university in your neck of the woods, think about getting involved in it. Think about being an Elmer, one that's not run or not run by outside sources. Those that have the club, the college club, they're run by students, but having an outside point of view, it's kind of like maybe like a board member or something of the club. having an outside view, having a way to focus the club, what they're doing, more experience, more knowledge of club of equipment, of antennas, of coax and stuff like that, and teach this younger generation on how to do stuff like that. I see the first part of it there where Kenny Height said, they weren't sure if the equipment was working or not. That kind of stems to me like, maybe a change in leadership happened, maybe the people that are involved wasn't sure, it hadn't been used in a while. Where if you have somebody that's been there or volunteers there, so to speak, mentoring these college kids and elmering them, then they can be looked to see, okay, well, this antenna is still good, this equipment is still working, and this one's not, so let's do this with it. So, it's a way of teaching new hams on how to do it, and that's where it really all comes back to being an Elmer. And we talked about that in a previous episode as well. So, all these things, not only with college level, but new hams and stuff we really need to work on. And one more part that I want to talk about in this news story. It says ARRL receives permission to rebrand the Collegiate Amateur Radio Operators Facebook page, initially organized by Sam Rose, KC2LRC, as the ARRL Collegiate Amateur Radio Initiative. All collegiate radio amateurs, clubs, and alumni were invited to participate and to get involved in activities that advance the art and enjoyment of amateur radio. All suggestions are welcome. So, not only did they rebrand this whole Facebook group, but they made it more towards an initiative. And one of the suggestions that were made was having it where you can have, some kind of contest. Have kind of like we have going on, or I had going on last Saturday, actually today that I'm recording this, is Skywarn Recognition Day, and you have National Weather Service stations that are on the air. Why not have something like this for college clubs? Why not have some kind of national or international, for that matter, contest where college clubs can get on the air, they can contest, they can participate in these things, and have a special day or special weekend just for them. That's one way to get more people involved, more people active, and get those contacts. So, on the flip side of that, this month, December, is the Youngsters on the Air event set. The annual Youngsters on the Air event takes place during the entire month of December, with the Yoda stations attempting to contact many other young radio amateurs around the world. The event offers an excellent opportunity to get amateur radios in their teens and early 20s to get on the air. The idea of this is to show amateur radio hobby to the youth and to encourage youngsters to be active in the hobby, said International Amateur Radio Union Region 1 Youth Working Group Chair Lisa Leaders, PA2LS. Considering giving a demonstration at your school or local club, gather together with your friends, grab a pizza, and make some QSOs, and enjoy a great pile-up. Let's show this great hobby to the world. This is not a formal contest, by the way. It is a way to get young people on the air with their friends. Numerous participating stations, primarily in Region 1, will be supporting Yoda call sign suffixes. So, this is another way, and not only on the college level, but also on the youth level, high school kids, junior high kids. All these kids need some way to learn about the hobby and to learn from people that know what they're doing, have been in the hobby for a little bit, can understand what they're going through. So all these things we really need to work on as a community, being those Elmers, teaching the young kids, because honestly, I think they are our future. So that pretty much wraps up the news for this episode. I didn't have a whole lot, unfortunately, because a lot of the news that came out when I'm recording this is actually before this episode goes live. So, but those are the two things that I wanted to talk on mainly about. But So I guess that pretty much wraps it up. Got a couple of announcements that I'm going to make, so stay tuned for those. And then I guess we'll call it an episode. Okay, so real quickly, I've received an email a couple days ago from a gentleman saying that, my audio stunk, and it did. And I hope that this episode is a whole lot better. He also talked about some of the segments that I have in my podcast that, like the news segment, for example. He said that the information was old and that all this information can be gotten from the ARRL website or from the Newsline podcast or something like that. On the flip side of that, I've received an email about a month ago or so when I asked about it on the previous podcast, and one person said that he liked the news. Yeah, it could be a little bit old, but he didn't get it because he didn't read the ARRL website. So 2 emails received on 2 separate ends of the topic on what to do. So what I've done is I've made a survey that I would like all y'all to take. And you can find it at everythinghamradio.com/survey. I have questions on different things, each segment, whether you like it or not, whether I should keep it or not, and then a couple fill-in-the-blank and questions at the bottom. What's your favorite part of each episode? What's your least favorite part? What can I do to make your listening experience better? Because like I've said before, this podcast is for you. I do it for you, for my listeners, and I thank each and every one of y'all for listening and for the critiques, whether they're good or bad. That's what I do. And again, I want to thank Kale, Jeremy, and George over at Ham Radio 360 for providing this brand new Audio-Technica Atr 2100 microphone. I hope that y'all enjoy this episode. The audio quality, I hope, is a whole lot better than what the last one is. There is a couple things that I'm still working on. I'm not a professional radio personnel, so you still hear me breathing sometimes, like just then. But I am working on that. So I do have a couple other things that I want to buy, hopefully after the first of the year, and I have an announcement after the first of the year as well. So stay tuned for that. So yeah, I guess that pretty much wraps it up. Again, I want to thank everybody for listening. You can find all of the links that we've talked about, as well as some additional information, in the show notes of today's episode, and you can find that at everythinghamradio.com/podcast/47. That's the number 47. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/everythinghamradio. That's my podcast page, or my blog page. Also, I have a Facebook group that I have. I wish I actually would have just started a group in the first place, but it makes it easier for us to communicate. And I'll actually have that survey on the group as well. And you can find that at facebook.com/groups/everythinghamradio. You can follow me on YouTube at youtube.com/everythinghamradio. Currently, I just basically, the videos, or each episode just has my logo as on the screen, and then the audio in the background. I tried a couple times to making a video and uploading it to it. It took quite a while. It took a lot longer. Of course, it was just one episode that I did. I may try doing that more after the first of the year as well. But subscribe to my channel on YouTube if you would prefer that method over listening on your phone or something like that. You can follow me on Twitter at K5CLM and get updates on when I publish something like this. Please also email or subscribe to my email list. You can do that at everythinghamradio.com/subscribe. You will get an email from me once you fill out the form and click on the Sign Me Up button. You'll get an email from me with the link that you want to click on to start receiving emails. Basically, it will be just when I publish a new blog post or a new podcast episode, you'll get an email saying, hey, this is what has published. I do send some other emails, but not a whole lot more. That's something else that I'm thinking about working on in the future. So subscribe to my email list for more information. Last but not least, if you would like to help support this podcast, there are several ways that you can do it. You can make a one-time donation through PayPal. You can become a per-episode contributor through Patreon, or you can shop on Amazon.com using my affiliate link. All information on how to do this is on my website, and you can find that at everythinghamradio.com/support. So yeah, I guess that pretty much wraps it up for this episode. Please leave a comment in the show notes, send me an email, leave a comment on Facebook, something, letting me know what y'all thought of this episode, of the audio quality. Hopefully it's a whole lot better. Like I said, I am still working on it, especially the breathing noises, and I do apologize for that. I am working on it, and that's one of the things that I am planning on doing come the first of the year, when I get a little bit more money, maybe some with Christmas money or something like that. I'd like to give me a boom arm and a little pop filter and actually set up a recording studio, maybe start doing this at home rather than at work. I'm actually doing it at home right now, which makes it really nice. I don't have interruptions every couple of minutes, somebody saying something on the radio or phone ringing or something like that. So it's making it a whole lot easier for me to do. But yeah, I guess that pretty much wraps it up, and thank y'all again very much for listening. I do hope that y'all send me some feedback. Check out the survey. Please take that and let me know what you think. So I guess until next time, this is K5CLM signing out. 73, y'all.